I'd like to welcome you all. Some of you will recall participating or receiving that amazing session from David Conway of KPMG in London in May, and he introduced us to the whole new landscape that AI is presenting. And that was followed by the second session by the renowned Kingsley Aikens and Gerard O'Neill. Kingsley was from the Network Institute and Gerard O'Neill of the futurist group Amorok. And they reminded us of the importance of the blended human and AI approach to deliver true CX excellence. So today, I'm absolutely delighted and honored to welcome Peter Heneghan. And he is the founder of the Future Communicator, which is a leading AI consultancy group based in the UK, and who has a wealth of knowledge around AI tools, and will be discussing examples of organizations who are using AI with tremendous effect. Peter was also the UK government's head of digital communications in number 10 Downing Street and was an advisor on all things AI. Peter, you've also joined us on the CX Academy Industry Advisory Council, where we're all working to sharpen our courses and our content to help upskill graduates and learners around the world. And we've been creating wonderful strategies on how to take full advantage of AI by blending these amazing new technologies with that human touch and upskilling them and their staff members to do that. So the future is extremely exciting for us all. And as Camilla mentioned earlier, everybody, it's going to be about 35 to 40-minute presentation, and we'll keep the questions till the end. So please do drop any questions into Q&A, and we'll cover those at the end. So I'm going to be handing over to you, Peter. But before we start, you might as well put your presentation up. I do have to ask that question. How in the name of God did an Irishman end up inside 10 Downing Street with open arms? Can you address that?
I was joking just beforehand. My next door neighbour also had the same question, but then followed it up with, I didn't think they allowed people like you work at number 10. But no, my backstory was they were looking for somebody who understood communications and reaching audiences at scale that wasn't traditional. And I'd worked a lot in social media and digital, and therefore they brought me in with open arms, basically to steal my ideas and make the most of them. But I absolutely love being there, but absolute pleasure to meet everyone. I'm just going to quickly put up on screen my presentation, so just one moment. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yep, over to you. You're looking good.
Brilliant. Well, absolute pleasure, and I love the fact that everyone's from different parts of the world. It reminded me, one of my first jobs was at the BBC World Service, and I used to go into the canteen, and it was like the United Nations, people from all over the world, and I absolutely love that. So I feel like today is a bit like that. But what I'm going to introduce you today is examples of AI and how it's now starting to revolutionize different industries. But I'm also going to introduce this concept of an AI halo as well, which is something I'll come on to as well. But it'd be great if you could follow me on LinkedIn. It'd be great to connect. And here's just some of the companies that I've been working with. And as Michael touched on, my most recent job was the Chief Digital Communicator for the UK government, which was an incredibly difficult time for the country in terms of we had Brexit followed by a global pandemic, and then we had the start of the Ukraine crisis, which obviously the UK is a big ally of the Ukraine. So an incredibly difficult time as a country, but as a learning opportunity for someone like myself, it was invaluable, and I really grew during that period. I'm going to start with a quick video.
Hi, I'm an AI avatar. Peter from the Future Communicator created this video to demonstrate to everyone here at CX Academy just how easy it is to use this technology. In this session, we'll have fun developing an AI mindset. We'll explore the latest trends, the challenges, and the opportunities of using these tools to enhance our customer experience roles. Enjoy the presentation.
So the first time I played a video like this to an audience, they thought I'd invented the internet. And I then had to explain to them that behind this technology, it's called Synthesia, is you simply choose an avatar, type a message like you would on a Word document, press go, it sends it off to make sure that there's no profanities or anything like that. And then it sends it back to you 20 minutes later with a beautifully formed avatar. And you can also get your own created and in your own voice. And this is the technology that exists. And that really excites me. It just shows you that there's a new world. And in this case, I could have had that in almost any language in the world. So this group here with so many people from around the world, I could have done a personal version for every single one of you in your native language, which is something you could never have done before. But we might kind of leave this towards the end, but I always kind of start with actually, maybe we should just touch on it now. If people want to drop into the chat, how do you feel about AI? Are you using it? Are you scared of it? Excited by it? It'd be just good to get a couple of quick shout outs of how people are feeling.
So Rashad says excited and apprehensive at the same time. Yeah, and I agree with that. Using and excited, love it, curious, love it, but slightly scared to take it for it to take over human roles. Charlotte. Using every day for little tasks. Yeah,
you get, and that's when I speak to companies, I go in and help them integrate AI, and I do the upskilling as well. You have a mix of people who are genuinely excited, tend to be about 10-15%, a large group in the middle, and then it's usually about 15 to 20% of people are terrified because they're like, I don't understand it, don't feel like I have the skills. So for me, AI is as much about the technology and it's as much about a cultural mindset change. And that's what I want to explore in this session. So I'm going to go way back before I go forward. Now, people from Ireland might recognize this, but most people globally may not. When I grew up in the suburbs of Dublin in the 90s, my only access outside of school to knowledge was this bus would turn up, which was being converted into a mobile library, and I would choose 2 to 3 books every week. It would turn up at about 2:30 to 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, get my books, so I'd head on my merry way. And that was my access to knowledge. And I was thinking about that, like the transformation that we're now going on. And I'm just going to walk you through the journey of that was knowledge for me in the 90s. But by the time I entered the workforce, I still felt it was fairly traditional. So my early days working for the BBC, it was largely still mainstream media would get the message out to the audience. So if I wanted to, as a journalist or as a press officer, I would need to impress upon a journalist my message, whether it's through a feature or in some cases through advertising or whatever it might be, to then reach the mass audience. And even at the start of the internet, that was mainly how it was. And then there was this massive change. And I think this is where I kind of had evolved fairly quickly. And I think I was kind of ahead of the curve in many respects, because I could see that this wasn't just an evolution. This was truly transformational, which was going on. And I understand if we look back, we get that. But most people saw social media as kind of what kids did. Don't take it too seriously. And it wasn't until it really kind of gathered momentum before people saw the power of it. And then for the first time ever, we could reach directly audience at scale. We could still go through the mainstream media. We could still advertise and so forth, but we could go direct and we could create communities in a way that we could never do before. And a great example of that is Gymshark, UK-based company, and set up by a guy called Ben Francis, who was interested in sport and particularly in weightlifting and bodybuilding. So he said there was no t-shirts that fitted him, and therefore he created in basically a garage his own sort of clothing range, but it was still a very small business. You fast forward to the here and now, and that's now a 1.5 billion pound business. And they've just recently opened up on the most prestigious street in London, on Regent Street, a massive store. And they're soon going to be taking on the likes of Nike and Reebok, and some of the other bigger players in the market. So they're a huge company. And similarly during this social media age, you had this emergence of other companies, your Ubers, your Boohoo, like in fashion, Deliveroo, Monzo. The names are endless. And the reason I bring this up now is Ben Francis, when he started Gymshark, he had no money, very little money. He would have never been able to scale a business in the way that he did. But what he managed to do was that kind of web of social media that was created allowed him to tap into influencers and communities and go direct to them and build excitement around his brand in a way that could never have happened before. And it unlocked this huge potential. And that's why multi-billion-pound companies have emerged out of that social media age. And what I'm saying is happening now is we're still living in that social connected world, but we're now starting to plug in really powerful tools, whether it's sort of major technologies or just ones that help us do our jobs more effectively. And we talk about this at the Future Communicator as being an AI halo. So this halo can be around you as an individual, like what are the tools that allow you to be more effective at what you do? Or your team, is there tools now that can speed up the process? There's a tool that I've used recently called Opus, and it will cut a video. So if we record this, this speech that I'm giving today, we could produce 20 video clips of this fully subtitled, and it would verify which ones are the best clips to put out, and it could send that back to me within 20 minutes. That would have taken a couple of days with a video editor in the past. So these tools, they exist, they can help you on your daily job much better, much quicker, and more effective than ever before. And the reason why this is important is when I mentioned Ben Francis and the Monzos and the Ubers, there's going to be an explosion of new opportunities that will emerge, because for the first time ever, we're having access to information in a completely radically different way, which means you're going to have small startup companies taking on the biggest players in the market, or some of the bigger players in the market leveraging AI really effectively very early and making the most of it. Or even, I'm originally from Ireland, there's no reason why a country like Ireland, let's call it an SME size country, can take on its next door neighbours in the UK and almost succeed on a level playing field, because they've created the right AI stack within their government and within their the workforce as well. So just wanted to break it up. This is a quick video from Google when they were announcing their AI offering.
AI, generative AI, AI is AI. It uses AI to bring AI.
Okay, I was just being playful there, but the reality is when they announced the amount of AI they were introducing, the share price just rocketed off the back of it. And it just shows you that there's so much interest in this space. And some people call it hype. Yes, there is some hype, but I actually think this is like a true revolution that we're undergoing at the moment. And some people often ask me, well, what is generative AI? And I try to boil it down into its most simple terms. And everybody has a slight different take on this. But for me, generative AI essentially is humans, big data producing content. And in this case, it could be text, image, audio, or audiovisual. And I think this is where a lot of people seem to not get this quite right. Anything that you produce that is text, image, audio, or audiovisual, and you use AI to do that, means that you can create incredible pieces of work, whether it's sending an email that's more effective, or a proposal, or it's producing a script for a TV documentary or video content, or whatever it might be. There's a million and one user case. I'm going to be showing some in a minute. It just means that almost everything that we deal with on a daily basis is in those formats, because we live in a digital world. And AI will help us do that much more effective. So people keep saying, oh, well, the AI is not there yet. It's not quite good enough. Well, the AI we see now is the worst it's ever going to be. So that's just something to bear in mind as well. And for me, if we think about it in our own lives, there's almost a two-track system for AI. There's big overarching technologies that cost millions, if not billions. That's for others to discuss. And then there's the useful tools that we can use every day, whether it's a Microsoft Copilot or a ChatGPT or whatever it might be. And so people are kind of thinking about both. I think what we should probably be prioritizing is the stuff that helps us do our jobs better with less. And an example of that is, so in the text space, the Future Communicator have created our own tool, which is built around prompts. And it's because most people struggle to prompt effectively. So I just wanted to have a bit of fun with you now. So we went into McLaren's communications team, and we said to them, we built this tool which will allow you to write your press releases in a matter of seconds. And they had just had Lando Norris, their F1 driver, had just had the fastest ever pit stop. So we said, let's have a race. Let's see who can win. So we said, look, give us a head start. We're a small startup. So in this case, we're dropping in information for a press release, which is the date, the location. In this case, it's about the driver and further information. Okay. And of course, Lando Norris beat us, but he only bet us slightly. I think ours took about 17, 18 seconds and his took 1.8 seconds. But I just want to have a bit of fun with you there. The fact is that you can write high-level content, and many of you will already know this, using a ChatGPT. In our case, we used this product we developed ourselves because it needed to be more bespoke and in the right tone of voice. But there's these tools that will help you just create content 80, 90 to 95% finished, and then you just have to nuance small amounts on top of that. And then areas like voice. So you've got people like Gwyneth Paltrow and Snoop Dogg who are now licensing their voices specifically to be used. So,
welcome to Speechify. Speechify can read to you in the highest quality digital voices available anywhere.
Yo, it's Snoop D-O-double-G, and I'm an English voice from the United States. It's time for you to get your reading superpowers.
Yeah, so you've got this sort of explosion of like audio, whether it's text to audio, but the fact that you've got celebrities who are like, actually, I'm going to license my voice. I just think that's a real kind of development as well. And then there's HeyGen. So this is McFall who works with me. He's been experimenting with a tool which will not only translate, but if you look at his lips will evolve with the language he's speaking.
Okay, so lately I've immersed myself in exploring a tool called HeyGen, which is a new AI video editing platform.
这不是你典型的软件，您可以立即将内容翻译成多种语言，太疯狂了。Lehrer beseitigen Sprachbarrieren und öffnen Türen, weltweit Schülern Wissen zu vermitteln und zu entwickeln.
And there was numerous other languages, and he recorded that video about 4 or 5 months ago. So the technology has evolved to the point where it's almost instantaneous now. So you're going to get to a point where you'll be able to have almost in real time translations through AI. So if you're a leader speaking to multiple audiences around the world, they could have their own version of that. So that's just coming down the track very quickly. And for me, there's this huge, huge pace of change. And this is why I think it's a revolution, not just an evolution, is that when I showed you myself visiting the mobile library, you know, that didn't seem that long ago. And obviously the internet's come along since, and the smartphone completely transformed the world we lived in. But where I think AI is completely different is, for the first time ever, we're going to have almost access to infinite knowledge at almost no cost. So I can talk to, so in a way I had to go to the library once a week and pick up a book and then read it. I can now chat to ChatGPT on my phone and it will answer almost any question about any subject. So even though I'm not an expert in code development, it can teach me how to code. If I wanted to learn a new language, it'll teach me a new language. If I wanted to find out about any subject whatsoever, it will provide me with pretty reliable information. And I think that's what's revolutionary. And if you multiply that across the planet, it's just going to transform how we all live. So we're going to have infinite knowledge at our fingertips at all times, which I think is just like, it is a revolution. So for example, just over a year ago, DALL-E 2, which is OpenAI's image generation model, if you asked it to produce an image of a cat, it would look like this. And now their latest model, which hasn't been released publicly yet, if you type in a prompt of a cat, you will, with a bit more information, it will create a short video like that. And like, that's completely generated by AI. It hasn't sourced it from Google or anywhere else. It's created that completely by generative AI. And you're seeing this sort of movement within the movie industry, particularly, where they're like, well, if we're going to be able to prompt to create all the movie content we have, what does that mean for the traditional studios that meant that they'd been working with until now? So I think there's going to be a revolution in that space. And another example is Runway, which is similar to Sora. It was released, the Gen 3 model was released, and within 24 hours, somebody had produced this mock-up of a Volvo TV advert.
Volvo for life.
So it's not perfect, but you saw the image of a cat just over a year ago, and now we're in a position where people are creating concept videos like this. Given another year, like, it will be really impressive what's going to emerge. And we're seeing this breaking through into other areas like Klarna, which is I think you can buy on credit clothing. I think it's aimed at different audiences, but I know it's particularly popular with millennials and Gen Z. They introduced an AI assistant, and it was able to do the work of 700 full-time agents, and the feedback has been incredibly positive. People have really liked it because the chatbots are now much more human in the way they interact. They have much more depth of knowledge, and they're able to serve that information to you in a way that you like it. So, you know, the amount of savings that they're having as an organization is huge, and you're going to start seeing this replicated across all sorts of industries. And then in my world, so I was responsible for introducing a new concept during the COVID crisis, which was, I said, well, why is it that journalists only get to ask questions at the daily press conference with the Prime Minister? And so we said, can we now start introducing public questions? So we put this out, and we said to the public, if you go through gov.uk/ask, we will randomly choose the questions and put them in front of the Prime Minister or the ministers at the daily press conferences. And the reaction was utterly incredible. We had 650,000 questions in total. And the one that I loved was the very first one, which was a grandmother from Skipton in the UK. And she said, when do I get to hug my grandkids? And I thought that was really powerful, because obviously I was living in the UK, hadn't seen my family in Ireland for a significant amount of time. And a journalist would never necessarily ask a question like that, particularly not during the pandemic. But so you had these more human questions, but you also suddenly had this huge amount of data. So we didn't expect this, but suddenly we're like, okay, we got 2 data scientists to start analyzing all the questions to find out if there was anything of value that we could share with governmental departments. And we discovered, like, sadly, issues like domestic violence. There was questions about what are you going to do about domestic violence, and we're able to pass it on to the Home Office and the police force, who could then explore that in more detail. And we had loads of examples like that. But it was taking us probably 5 days at a time to make any sense out of the data that was coming in. If I was to do that right now, myself, I'm not a data scientist, I could get insightful meaning within an hour and share that with a minister. So we went from up to 5 days to get anything of insightful meaning to a minister, to a government department, to being able to do it almost immediately. And that is game changing. So that's just revolutionary. And that's just a small user case example. And then we're reimagining the world with AI now. So I think a lot of people are applying old ways of looking at technologies to an AI empowered world. So Jonah Peretti, the founder of BuzzFeed, talked about when when TV arrived, and people basically changed radio and put it on TV. We had similarly when social media came along, TV companies were putting TV on social media. They weren't thinking about the medium that they were using. So I think with AI, it opens up a complete new opportunity. So in the media space, Brian Eno, one of the most sort of influential sort of musicians, producers of all time, there's a documentary about his life. And rather than it being a linear documentary that, start, middle, and an end, what they've done is they've basically put all the different sections of the film, like the footage, into the cloud. And when you watch it in a film theater or at home, every person that watches it will have a different version of the same documentary, because what we'll do is the algorithms will sort of reform what footage is put into what place. It will leave some bits out, add bits in, have different types of narratives. And so they're completely revolutionizing how cinema or documentaries can be watched. And that completely blew my mind, because that was somebody thinking about, we now have the computing power and the AI technology to allow us to do that for the very first time. Or will.i.am, and the quality is not great on this, but will.i.am was recently at a conference that I attended, and he was talking about, he has a podcast series, and his co-host on the podcast is actually an AI avatar. And for him, he was saying, I will never be able to answer questions personally to hundreds, if not thousands of people, but my AI avatar will. So he's now really looking at the whole format of how you produce a podcast. And then Nike have recently gone to a number of sports stars, from basketball to football. So Erling Haaland, they had a number of basketball players, some of the biggest in the world. And they said, we want to create a personal footwear just for you. We want to know all about your passions, your sports, your personality. And then what we'll do is we'll create a bespoke footwear. So it was a combination of AI and 3D printing, and they were able to produce what, like as their chief innovator says, what would take weeks and months is now taking days and weeks. So the whole speeding up that process. So further down the line, we might be in a position where clothing that we wear becomes much more personalized to us as individuals, because we're able to use 3D printing and AI together to create them. And certainly in the prototype staging, that would be the case. And recently I was lucky to be invited to the Future of Britain conference. It's an event by the Tony Blair Institute. And they talked about, in the space of government, AI could reduce, so 1/5 of the workforce time in the public sector could be saved using existing AI tools. So that's before we get on to emerging tools. So imagine what an impact that would have to free up resources and free up time for the workforce to focus on even bigger projects that they currently can't do now. And similarly, we're starting to see, so as I mentioned before, anything that's image, text, audio, or audiovisual, AI can then be put across it, and it can actually start to look at it in interesting ways. So in this case, there's new technologies which are starting to identify breast cancer up to 5 years before it forms. I've seen another one that was announced, I think yesterday or the day before, where if you took a picture of your thumb, it would then analyze the color, and then it would give you potential, how your health is. So we're starting to see this huge evolution within the healthcare system, as in how quickly they can diagnose and provide healthcare to the patient. And we're seeing this in the space of furniture as well. So there's this particular company, you can take a photo of a space. They can then suggest the kind of furniture that you may want. And they've almost got this full circle where they can, from photographing your room to the concept of what furniture you want, all the way through the chain of sending you the furniture, which they're now renting rather than owning. So there's this really interesting kind of user case of how AI has been used at all steps of it. So rather than you going to a showroom, choosing a bunch of furniture, not sure if it's the right size, this will sort of have measured up your space and given you highly tailored recommendations about what you would want. And this has been used by hotels already. It's been used by student accommodation. And I think this will become sort of more mainstream in the near future. We're seeing this also in the space of, this is the concept at the moment, but it's not the most exciting restaurant I've ever seen. But essentially, it's AI meets automation, which means that the technology is going to be creating the food, and then you're only going to have up to 3 members of staff within a given restaurant unit. So so far it's been used for kind of more fast food experiences, but as a concept, it's proven to be a huge success. And I think there's evolutions happening here. So I think what I'm trying to show you is that this is emerging across almost every sector. It's also in agriculture. They're using a drone technology to work out the crops that should be grown on a particular land, and at what point they should be fertilizing the land, and all this kind of stuff. So it's this evolution of all areas of the industry. And I'm almost coming towards the end, so we can ask questions, because I feel like I've thrown an awful lot at you. But for me, how do we then take all that information and reapply it into our own world? And for us, we think that this is crucial. There's no point upskilling your workforce, but then denying them the tools to do their job, or having, a really great vision, but then you're not putting the resourcing behind it. So we think success looks like having a really clear vision of how AI, whether it's just simple improvements to productivity or it's something much more revolutionary, making sure your staff are incentivized, that they want to go on board on this journey, that you give them the right skill sets, and they're constantly being upskilled, and then you sort of work in unison, and that's where you'll have the success. Otherwise, there'll be a combination of, if you don't have the skills, people will be anxious because they're like, this new technology has been brought in and I don't know how to use it. And the approach that we take at the Future Communicator is we have this, what we call the AI halo. It's like we want to build the tools around you. And for us, what's really important is building that awareness and inspiring your staff about the art of the possible, how it impacts on their job, then giving them the right skill sets, auditing the work. So boil it down to, what are the deliverables each of you has to do in your daily job? And it could be anything from newsletters or proposals or whatever it might be. And then go, is there an AI or automation solution that can help you do that job even better? Make sure they've got the right skill sets, and then you start to launch the technologies, maybe in a pilot phase, and then introduce it more holistically. And importantly, you then need to revisit it, I'd say every 6 months to 12 months, because as you've shown, hopefully, the technology is evolving. Tools are coming onto the market at all times. And I'll give you a great example of that. The Future Communicator, we've analyzed over 2,000 AI tools. There's probably a further 2,000 to 4,000 tools out there on the market that we haven't even got to yet. And every day there's new tools that might do very specific tasks within your workforce, and it's worth exploring what they might be. And I wanted to finish with this final concept because I know you're CX experts. Before, Henry Catino Mason said this, and it really stuck with me. We're living in an expectation economy. So when you get into an Uber and you don't have to pay, it turns up just on time as expected, it gets you to your destination. When you then go into a restaurant and they don't take cards for some reason, or you get really bad service, your expectation is what you get with an Uber or with an Airbnb or hopefully some of the services I just showed you before. And our expectations are just significantly higher. And a lot of that's been transformed, the expectation, because of technologies. So technology, and now increasingly AI built on top of that, becomes increasingly more important. So if one of the things, if you could leave with this idea that there's an expectation economy and how can you build your expectations, I think that would be really valuable. And the best example I can think of this, and this, when I heard about this, it blew my mind. A company based out of Ireland, but they also have an operations in the US as well, called Mana. They're an automated drone delivery service. I couldn't believe it when I was told the product that is most popular in Ireland that they deliver is hot coffees. And that blew my mind. The idea that it wasn't medical devices or whatever it might be, it's hot coffees, cappuccinos, lattes, and they're doing like 10,000 deliveries a day. And the average is taking 3 minutes, under 3 minutes, and costs less than £1. So this expectation economy, when this type of drone technology sort of settles in, the expectation is we will want anything at our disposal in a matter of 3 to 5 to 10 minutes at almost no cost or very low cost. So yeah, I just wanted to leave you with that because I think that's the direction of travel we're going in. And yeah, I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
Peter, we have tons of questions and they're phenomenal. And I would agree with you around the expectations economy. I think, you know, one of the things that I learned first when I first got involved with CX is that people compare any expectation you get today around the best expectation you've had recently. And if you take a Uber, if you take that Mana drone delivery, you know, I know in China, we're dealing with China at the moment, that they would say that anything that takes more than 3.5 minutes to be delivered to me at home, it's too late. And you're like, so our expectations are going through the roof. And it's so, you know, AI is going to create new challenges. There's no question about that, particularly around that expectations. You know, how do we manage and make sure that our consumers are comparing us like with like? Because, you know, if I get an amazing resolution with, let's say, Airbnb, I expect every company I deal with to give me a similar resolution. Airbnb are really good at that. And if they don't, I challenge you. And sometimes that's very unfair. So no, it's a fascinating place to start. We have literally tons of questions here, and I'm going to go through some of the early ones, and maybe Camilla, you can jump in as well. But one of the first ones that was put out here, and it's a really interesting one. Can AI read emotions? You know, because in customer experience, we are in the emotions business. What are your thoughts around that first question?
Not yet is probably the right answer, but I'll give you an example. I use ChatGPT on my phone, and I talk to it as if it's a human, and I see it as almost being this mentor in my life who's got infinite knowledge. So it's helping me craft ideas, plan my week ahead, all these kind of things. And there's another one called Pi.ai, which is actually free to use, and that's even more human in how it interacts with you. So it's not at that level, but in many ways, the kind of questions we ask, we don't need deep emotion necessarily just yet. What we kind of need is somebody that can give us a kind of sensible solution. But it's getting there. Like the more data that goes into these models, the better they're going to be. They'll never be quite human, but they'll be able to mimic a lot of our behaviors because they're basically mimicking the data is what they're mimicking back to us.
Brilliant, brilliant. Peter, can I ask you, Rashad, who we know very well, thanks, Rashad. He asked the question, Peter, you mentioned that when the government UK ask was opened and many questions were received, they allocated 2 individuals to assess the validity of the questions. In his experience, in Peter's experience, what tools or policies or procedures is he saying businesses or governments are applying to uphold the integrity of AI? Can you address that?
Yeah, so it's a big question, and there's a lot of work around policy about, like, because there's obviously inherent bias. I didn't have time today, but I could have talked to you about a lot about the bias, because a lot of the internet, particularly the English-speaking internet, is comes out of America, so it's going to have a very American influence for starters, and a lot of this data is kind of open source from spaces like that. So there's a lot of work being done about the bias. For me, the most important element of this is the final piece of the jigsaw has to be human at all times. And we won't get everything right, but we'll get things to a much higher level of close to being right if the last sort of barrier before it goes out is it's a kind of human oversight, whether that's putting in the right kind of procedures in place, or it's in a case of if you're working and you're doing social media content, it's that nothing goes AI direct to customer. It goes via somebody who's an expert who looks over it, checks it, like an editor-in-chief, and then puts it out. So, but there is a lot of work, particularly on the policy side, about what is acceptable and what's not at the moment. It's a bigger question. I'm probably not answering it as well as I could have.
I can connect you and Rashad together, because you're both in London, and you're both on the Industry Advisory Council too, which is very good. Charlotte, a very simple question. You know, she loves AI, no question about that, but she's slightly concerned for it to take over the human roles again. How do we address that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I know you mentioned Kingsley, who's from the Networking Institute. Well, we're both in agreement on this, that it's a combination of, there's certain skills that humans do much better, and then there's the technology. So what I'm hoping will happen is the people who will get on ahead will be the ones who will be, great at networking, great at public speaking, those things that the computers just can't do very well. And they will rise up with the technologies, because the technology gets easier and easier to use. As I said, like, you create avatars by simply typing, like a Word document, and it can produce it. So I think it's inevitable that there's going to be a significant amount of jobs being lost at different sort of different parts of the almost the business supply chain, and because the technology will do it quicker and better. It's similar during other revolutions. I would put this as important as electricity. I know some people say, well, you don't, like, we're at the beginning of something that is truly, so what electricity did in terms of generating power, AI is going to generate intelligence at a scale where we can do things that we've never done before. And ultimately, that's probably going to overtake humans, but what they won't be able to overtake is our humanity. So therefore, just great human skills hopefully will rise, but also staying abreast of what the technologies are and that are relevant to your area of work is kind of important.
No, brilliant. And it's funny, Julia Murray, who is known to us as well, had mentioned at the very outset that it's like, using the calculator for your first time. I remember as a kid getting my first calculator, and we were allowed to use them in exams, and it was like, oh my God, this is just going to save so much time and effort, etc. So it's a lovely way to do it. I also was very blown away by the Volvo ad. I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, the creativity. I mean, the production values in executing something like that could be up to $1 million. I mean, phenomenal that AI is creating something like that. And as you said during that ad piece, that there's work to be done, but still, at the speed of the way AI is moving. I mean, will we see movies? Will we see content created? I mean, is there a history? Is Hollywood, are they shaking in their boots? I mean, what's going on?
They are. I've forgotten his name, but he's one of the biggest owners of studios in the United States. Sorry, his name escapes me, but he was about to invest literally hundreds of millions into some studios. He saw Sora, so the example I showed you of the cat, and thought, hold on a second. So he's pulled back his investment, thinking that this whole sector is going to completely change. And as I said before, this is the worst it's ever going to be. So at any point, it's just going to get better. And obviously, that example, the Volvo ad, the person who created that was like a really creative editor already. So he had to plot this together. So it wasn't like he just said, hey, produce me a Volvo advert. So he had to script it out, figure it all out, and then use the technology and piece it together. So I think people who are really amazing at kind of video editing, content creation, and that kind of work, using AI will just be the best. And I had this with the Arts Council in the UK, where they were like, oh, this is going to destroy industries. And I said, well, not necessarily. If you're an artist like will.i.am, he's using the technologies to his advantage. And so there will be people who will still paint and do things, let's call it in the traditional sense. That will always exist. But there will be this revolution in new content creation styles that will start to emerge. And you're already seeing that. You look at online, there's a lot of AI content. And my son, he's only 10, he's watching videos all the time that have been created by AI around his favorite program. So he loves Herbie, which is a Disney car that has a mind of its own. People are now using AI to create content around that, and he watches that as if it's watching the movie itself.
No, this is brilliant. And by the way, Peter, tons of really good feedback on the presentation, enlightening, etc. Another question here from Susie: is there an AI tool to analyze data on an Excel sheet? I have time set aside this afternoon and getting a dose of data, and I go, God, wouldn't that be nice? Thanks, Susie. And any thoughts on that?
There's loads of them. I mean, if you get the kind of the paid for ChatGPT, they have versions that will do that. What I can do after this, as I said, we've analyzed 2,000 tools. We're going to be putting that up on a website in about a month's time. But I will go back over that and pull out a bunch of them. And Michael, I'll share it with you, and you can share it with the group as well. But anything like that, if there's any tools that... So what I want to do is, the problem I'm finding is there's too many of these tools emerging, and there's not like a sensible one place where you can find ones that are actually data secure, GDPR compliant, all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to find the ones in the market that are actually business essential. So I'm very happy to share that.
Well, no, that first of all, that would be superb, and we'll pass that on to everybody who's on board today. Mando has asked a question, and it's very interesting, Mando, that I really like. He said, in the luxury sector, we prioritize people over machines because emotions and customer experience is essential. While AI is excellent for operational efficiency and saving time, placing AI directly in front of the customer is something I don't foresee, particularly in the luxury industry. That's a really interesting question. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd say I agree with them to an extent. I think there'll be an augmentation. So it hasn't been confirmed, and it may not happen, but I'm in talks with potentially going to Dubai for the first time, which would be really exciting. They've got a big conference over there, and specifically for the hospitality sector. And what I want, if I get to go ahead, I'm going to do a report which will be from somebody booking their flights all the way to staying in the hotel, and that could be in the luxury market as well. So I think what will happen, that luxury, so at the more kind of cost-saving end of, say, that market, it might be that you, in the same way that some gyms you go to now, you don't really come across people. You just scan in, go in, do your workout, come home. You wouldn't want that in some of the 5-star hotels. But what you might want is a combination of somebody who can speak in your language, or you might have AI built in your rooms, where it's like, okay, I want an itinerary for the day in Dubai. I'm interested in these things, and then it will have a conversation with you and give you information. And yes, you could go down to the lobby and probably get a lot of that, but sometimes you just want to plan stuff on your own. So I think it will be a combination of it being used in, and it'll also be used possibly in getting feedback or trying to get further information. But I think where the luxury market will be different is you won't be stuck with that, say, for example, a chatbot. The chatbot might be there for 80% of the work, but then it will push you directly to somebody who's a deeper expert for the other 20%, because it might be a tricky question that you're asking. So I think it will be sort of more augmented, but I think the luxury market tend to adopt technologies quicker than a lot of others because of the ability to do so, because of the financial might that they have.
Well, I mean, literally so many questions around, are there any tools to do this or do that? And Saren and Olga, the very interesting conversation going on here. But basically, and this is something we might do later, Peter, we might just look at some of these questions and we can follow up directly with someone. But basically, is there an AI tool that can make a business intelligence dashboard? The other one was, are we going to see the death of data analytics? Are they now redundant jobs? I mean, does AI do all of this work for us now going forward? What are your thoughts in that space?
I think what will need to happen is, and that's where like embedding it in the right way is doing like an audit within a business, because then you can find out what kind of technologies exist and what will help every person do their job better. I don't think specific jobs will be lost, although they will certainly change. One of my predictions is that in the long term will become, I think it's an American phrase, multi-hyphenate, which is we'll do multiple jobs. So you may not be an expert now, but the example I gave of the gov.uk ask questions, I'm not a data expert, but because the AI can do this brilliantly, I can therefore become a data expert to a level. So I think we'll become multi-discipline in the work we can do. The question, I feel like I've slightly missed the question.
No, it's fine. I look, so many questions are kind of feeding into, do you know of a tool for this, for that, etc. And I think we're going to address those separately. And Camilla and I and yourself, we might just have a further conversation and address those. The feedback that we're getting here today is phenomenal. And we just can't deal with all of these questions. But, the obvious, there are some concerns out there in terms of the employee view on things. What is the general impact? And we are all concerned about that. And hence the question, I suppose, about the data analytics specialist. Is that job now redundant because of these? And I think what we'll do is, there's going to be so many new tools that are landing every day. And it would be really interesting that we can send a link. You were talking about putting together an audit of some of the greatest tools out there and putting that on your website. I think what we should do with that, Peter, is make sure we send that out to everybody as part of this, and that they can then connect with you directly on some of these questions, if that was okay. But it's been a phenomenal feedback, and your presentation today has covered everything beautifully. We haven't gone too deep into examples because there's just so much of it out there. But it's a lovely way for us to finish off our trilogy on the AI series. And I think from our perspective, our duty is, we need to upskill employees within organizations to do more with the human touch, to make it more deeper and more emotional, etc. And let AI be very much, the co-pilot advising us on what needs to be dealt with speed and convenience. There's so many benefits from that perspective. So I think from our perspective, I'm going to say, look, we've promised everybody we've got an hour. We've kind of reached that point of the stage. There's lots of questions coming in. We're not going to ignore any of these questions. We're going to look at these and come back to you individually if that's something. So we will leave this open for you. In fact, 7 new questions have just landed. So I think we'll be busy dealing with these 10, 11, 12. Sorry, there's loads of new messages coming in. And maybe a lot of that is, thank you very much for a brilliant presentation, Peter. It's been great. Camilla, thank you for organizing everything so brilliantly. We've had a phenomenal group from all over the world here today. It's just been superb. And it's great to know that we're feeding you some golden nuggets in your day-to-day roles. So we're delighted with that. But everybody, thank you for your time. Peter, thank you for your time and your insight. And look, we will be coming back to everybody with the recording, but also to address some of these questions and give you a link to Peter's website so that you can see what new tools are coming down the tracks. And I suspect, Peter, that may be an ongoing thing you're doing on your website. Is it? There's a constant audit of AI tools. Is that right?
Yeah, and actually, this could be quite interesting. The next level will be to then build a chatbot function or a quiz on top of that, which would be, I work in a specific type of role company, and then it will produce a report with the 5 tools you must have and another 10 that you might want to look at. So that's where I want to get to, but that stage, that might be October. So September, we'll be launching the website officially. But in the meantime, I can go in and look at the tools that we have and feedback to everyone if you send me the questions.
Yeah, and those 10 questions have now gone to 34 since we've started, or just mentioned that. So we've got plenty of follow-up work to do to get these answered back. But thank you, Peter, on behalf of everybody who attended today. Thank you so much for your time and really appreciate it.
Brilliant.